What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Hello, everyone. Today's guests are a father and daughter dynamic duo. He is an architectural and interior design industry leader. She is a recent Cornell Hotel School grad. His company's projects have been published in Hospitality Design, Metropolis, Interior Design, and have been cited in the New York Times. She was basically born into our industry. He is the author of an architect's cookbook, A Culinary Journey Through Design. They also co-authored a book called Max the Mighty Mushroom. He's president and owner at Glen Company, Glen Coben, and she is his daughter starting her career journey, Meyer Coben. Hey, welcome, guys.
Hey, Dan. Good morning.
So just so everyone knows, this is the first time, and just so you know, this is the first time I've interviewed two people at once, but I do think as hospitality, there's so many stories of families being drawn to this world that we're in. And I thought it would be interesting to explore with you guys.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having us on your podcast. Congratulations on the launch of it. And from what I've listened to thus far, it's great, and it's really cool how you've connected a lot of people in the industry that are disparate, sort of very, very different voices, yet we're all connected through that topic of, or that notion, or that idea of hospitality. So thank you for having me on and for having Maya on as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have both of you. So what we normally do is we'll start with the question, how do you define hospitality? And I think what I'll do is I'll ask Maya first. Maya, how do you so your dad doesn't influence you? How do you define hospitality as a recent graduate?
He's influenced me my whole life, and you won't let him do it now?
Yeah. No, I'm pulling you out of the batter's box. So I'm asking you.
No helicopter.
Okay.
How do you define hospitality, Maya?
All right. Well, Dad, let me know if this flies by you. But I think I studied hospitality for 4 years, and every course I took, I learned something different and a different aspect of it. So I would start with a little background in the sense that one of my first classes at Cornell, it was management communications, or the first level of that. And they were giving us career advice, right? So they were saying, this is how you should start in order to get the most hospitality experience humanly possible. So they said, do operations, start in operations, because you can't learn how to run a business, how to own a business, anything about hospitality essentially without working on the ground and working on the floor and doing the heavy duty lifting. So I did that, but that's another story. But essentially,
wait, I want to hear that. I want you to tell part of that story, because it's pretty. Yeah, it's a pretty great story.
No,
we can come back there, but let's get on to the definition.
Yeah. I think it's the interaction of people. So you're giving back, you're creating a community. I think if I had to pick one term to define hospitality, it would be community and a sense of feeling, that guest interaction.
I love that sense of community. And again, all these conversations that I'm having, it all revolves in this area around that, and being open and creating and hearing from others. But so now, Glen, you've been doing this a lot longer than Maya. How do you define hospitality from all of your experience?
Well, hospitality, I guess it was Danny Meyer who said that hospitality is a team sport. And I guess that's a pretty cool way of putting it. But I think that as an architect and a designer, we need to be able to listen. We need to be somewhat willing to be, we need to be malleable in terms of that dialogue with our clients. I always say that, how we service the hospitality industry is through empathy and integrity and listening to our clients and understanding what their needs are. And I think that, we're delivering a product where we're having people feel a certain way. And if you think about hospitality outside of, so that's design. But the cool thing about hospitality really for me is that it crosses so many different sectors. And, even listening to some of your podcasts, hospitality comes in so many different shapes and so many different sizes, and that the commonality, as Maya said, is a sense of community, but it's also a sense of giving through empathy, through integrity, through the actions that we provide, or the actions that we make in given situations.
I love that. And, Maya, as far as that idea of community and then having that empathy and really listening from your experience in operations as you were going through college and what you're doing now, like, how did you touch upon that? What did you learn?
Well, I actually worked for Danny Meyer in the Union Square Hospitality Group. And so obviously they ingrained the empathy, the sympathy, just that overall sense of community. And while I was a hostess, they go that extra mile, and that's what makes them special. And I think that's kind of what I've taken away with what my dad always says: when you're learning, when you're working, you learn what you want to be or who you want to be and what you don't want to be like. And I remember being a hostess and wanting to display those feelings of empathy and wanting to connect with the guests more than just your average hostess. Maybe that was partially my dad's influence. Maybe that's just in my DNA. I'm not sure. But that kind of made me who I am, essentially.
I love that as well. And I keep hearing Danny Meyer. So I'm going to connect Danny Meyer to all three of us. Okay. So
okay.
Danny Meyer, if I can think of an ultimate guest on this, because I really love all the work that he's done on that idea of hospitality quotient and everything he's built at Union Square Hospitality. He was actually the last person that I talked to at an industry event, HD Summit, that Stacy Shoemaker puts on every year in Mexico, just before the pandemic, and our whole industry basically shut down. And I asked a question.
I was going to go to that and decided there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world right now. Maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to go.
Well, after I went up to him and I had his book and he signed it, and I talked to him and just told him like what a fanboy I am. And actually, when I started writing and creating content, I guess in like 2016 or 17, there was a really cool meeting I had with your dad. He's like, hey, come on, I want you to check out this place. And I can't remember the name of it, but it was that new Danny Meyer bakery, right?
Daily Provisions.
It was the Daily Provisions. My dad actually had recently passed away, and I was writing so much like impactful memoir type things. And I opened up and I shared it with your dad, Maya. And then, that's when he told me that he had written this architect's cookbook. And so again, like Danny Meyer here is a theme, and really he created that. We were sitting in one of his restaurants, and it somehow had an effect on me to open up to your dad on that front.
He's easy to do that too, or with.
Yeah.
Because I don't tell you what to do. I just listen.
Okay. So you're designing environments, Glen. And if you think about going into your book, the architect's cookbook that you wrote, and where you're going on this culinary journey of, okay, here's the built space. And here are some recipes that kind of tie me in through that. And it was also, I think that was your first book. Oh no, Max and the Magic Mushroom was your first book.
Max
with Maya.
Max. Yep.
But like through all of that and all of your experience of just creating these environments, experiencing hospitality, like what was the best delivery of hospitality that you can remember in your career?
As a delivery of hospitality.
Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you about the worst delivery of hospitality because there's a pending lawsuit about it. So maybe that's for a future episode. But best delivery of hospitality, boy, that's a really good question. And I'm thinking back pretty quickly because you kind of caught me completely off guard with that. which is it's very cool because this is like right at the moment. I mean, I've been the fortunate recipient of incredible levels of hospitality, and when you go to a restaurant, and I'll say this, some of these chefs that have created incredible menus, I've been as I said, the fortunate recipient of some testing menus. So Gray Kunz comes to mind, for instance, when he had opened Cafe Gray at the Time Warner Center, and I was there at his invitation because he wanted to tweak a few things in the design. And I was there with his kitchen designer, a guy named Jimmy Huey, who's a dear friend of mine, also a Cornell grad, and he designs kitchens. And we sat down at the chef's table, and Gray just cooked for us. And I think we were there for 3 or 4 hours. And it was a one-on-one experience, which you just don't get in real life. And it was truly behind the scenes, and you could see his mind working. And I know you asked about hospitality experiences, but it's those kinds of moments that I've had in my life that actually prompted the reason why I wrote the book, which was to kind of crack open the creative process. Not so much that we do, because the creative process that we do, we know about it, and I know about it, and there's no mystery to it. But it's very similar to what a chef does or a restaurateur does to creating a menu or creating a restaurant. And now that I bought a little time, I remember a time when my wife and I went to the French Laundry, and we went out there. We went to Napa and Sonoma for our 10th wedding anniversary, I believe. And a chef friend of mine, Jonathan Waxman, had made the reservation at the French Laundry. And my wife is a little bit of a picky eater, right, Maya? Just a little bit. A little bit. And, we get there, and the French Laundry, hard restaurant to get into, hard reservation to get. And we're sitting there.
Unless you're Gavin Newsom.
Unless you're Gavin Newsom. Yes, exactly. Good point. We look at the menu. My wife closes the menu and said, not for me. Let's go. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I mean, this is like this is the cathedral here. So one of the servers or the hostess came over to us and said, "Is everything okay?" And my wife said, "Well, a little bit of a picky eater." And the restaurant said, "Don't worry about it. We embrace that, and we just tell us what you don't like. Don't tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like, and then we'll create a menu around that." And it was this incredible pivot for the kitchen. Subsequent to that, I became friends with one of the chefs who probably was there, and I told him the story, and he goes, "We don't like that kind of thing, but we're forced to do it." But that's the thing. It's right. It's that empathy. It's that pivoting, the quick pivot to be able to make the guest feel as if they are the number one. And how many times do we go into a restaurant? I hate to hear it today when people are complaining about staff in restaurants, because that's just, it blows my mind that people don't understand what's going on. But prior to the pandemic, you're out to have a good time. And if something goes wrong, kind of roll with it. So there are way too many examples of bad hospitality than, look,
I want to get to the bad stuff in a minute, because the bad stuff actually oftentimes informs us on a different journey, right? It's a pain, it's a suffering that says, "Woo, we don't want to go back there again." But something that you said really resonated when you were having the testing menu up at Time Warner Center, when you were sitting there. What was his name?
Yeah, Gray Kunz, who sadly left us a couple of years ago. He passed away. I think he was in Hong Kong or Singapore at the time. Okay. Yeah, he was a brilliant chef. I'll be honest, we did not get along very well. He was a consulting chef for a hotel we were doing in Saratoga Springs, and he flatly said he didn't want us to be designing the hotel, not let alone the restaurant. the client said, no, you're both here. You're both on our team and you're going to work together and play in the sandbox together. So, and we did.
Okay. So it's
that experience didn't take away my admiration for this guy.
Correct. Well, if you go into that, like that sandbox and playfulness, I can say that for me, when I'm helping come up with solutions for a hotel, like for product or whatever, one of my favorite things to do is, and I don't get to do it that often, is to watch the creative process, to watch you, Glenn, or your teams or other clients of mine, where they're like sitting there and feeling and looking at the palettes of finishes and textures and textiles and kind of looking at that rainbow of solutions. And there's something about that moment where they're so in this zone, in this design development and picking what they want. And that brought me to the testing menu that you were seeing. And it's that like kind of creative iteration that oftentimes we only see the end product. And it's really special to be able to see that creative process and birthing process, if you will. So that really spoke to me. And how do you, like, what's your favorite part of kicking off a project when it comes to that playfulness and sandbox?
Well, it's really the beginning part of that whole process is understanding the story. What is the story we're going to be telling about this project? And I kind of want Maya to tell a little bit of a story of Gabrielle Kreuther, because Maya would come with me to some construction meetings. She's had a pretty interesting seat for my journey. And I know this, hey buddy, I know this was part of one of your college essays, but why don't you tell Dan about that? Because that to me shows that the story is working in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I never thought about it like that, but I remember wanting to spend the day with you in the city, and it started with me getting a Shake Shack at Grand Central and sitting at one of the
Danny
bar
Meyer
stools.
alert.
Yeah, Danny Meyer alert, and facing the wall by myself. And I was like, this sucks. I should just, suck it up and be a big girl and walk into the construction meeting because I could totally handle that. So I walk into Gabrielle Kreuther, and it is just a blank space. It's a massive, massive restaurant. And I don't even think was there any structure there yet, Dan? I don't think so.
I think the walls were the wall. You could sense where the edge of the dining room was going to be and where the kitchen was going to be. And just for reference sake, this is a 2 Michelin star restaurant. The chef was, again, a Danny Meyer connection, opened the restaurant at the Museum of Modern Art. Mm. And this was one of the finest gentlemen, forget about chef, finest gentlemen that I've come in contact with in the 21 years I've been doing this. Full of empathy, full of integrity. And he waited and waited and waited. He wasn't like, hey, I got tattoos and I worked in a restaurant for a week. I'm going to open up my own restaurant. This is a chef who like went the apprenticeship route, and he was tapped every single place that he went. Like when he cooked at Jean-Georges at Columbus Circle, and when Jean-Georges had a guy like Gabrielle Kreuther in the kitchen, Jean-Georges, you could pin the date when Gabrielle took over that kitchen is when Jean-Georges started his quest to open up restaurants around the world, because he had a guy in his flagship restaurant who knew what he was doing. Yes, an anchor. And so this was Gabrielle's first restaurant on his own, and it was in the Grace Building, which is like 50-yard line in New York City, right on Bryant Park. So sorry, buddy. I kind of wanted to give a little context.
Well, thank you. So I remember sitting in this like openly, I think it was winter, maybe it was freezing in this space, which I feel like is a very important detail. And I was sitting there with my Shake Shack, and I remember sharing my fries with everyone, which I don't like doing because I'm an only child. But I remember hearing my dad tell the story of what he wanted. And I remember him saying, well, what do you want? Talking to the chef and saying, what's your vision? Like my dad always says what makes his brand and his company so unique, and I may be butchering this, but he works for the
Butcher
people.
away.
He works for the people instead of for himself, you know, so he wants to create the image of his client rather than have a company image, you know, rather than have a brand of his own. And so I said to him, well, your brand is creating those unique and those creative moments in these restaurants that now I'm more in tune to when I go dine, not only at restaurants my father has designed, but at any restaurant, you know. So at Gabrielle Kreuther, I remember going back and it was the story of the store. So it was always cool for me to be able to see the construction site and then come back a few months or a year later and have the columns up and you have the art coming in and the wallpaper, and we're figuring out how to space the tables evenly so that it's not too tight but not too spaced out, and finding that balance. So I really got to see the project from start to end and hear the story that the chef wanted to tell, hear the story of Alsace and having the light fixtures look like the street lamps. And it was the most unique little touches that my dad was able to add in order to tell this story. And what always makes me upset is that people that don't appreciate hospitality they don't have an appreciation for those little things. Not that it's expected that you would go into a restaurant and say, oh, those poles, they must be from an old barn stable in Vermont, the columns. Like that, it's not intuitive, but I've dined with a lot of my friends who just don't have that same sort of appreciation. Not that everyone's supposed to. I think it's very niche. But yeah.
I think it's
What's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. What's interesting about what Maya's saying is that I start thinking about her generation and all of our clients, every single one of our clients, no matter how old they are, they all have bought into this concept of Instagrammable moments, right? And it's funny because Maya's of that generation where they are, you know, looking at Instagram or they're on Snapchat or, you know, and these are important, in a sense, important social platforms for us. And I would say, and I think Dan, at one of the hospitality design summits years ago, I think one of the people said, the best way to stay relevant is to make sure that your 12-year-old child is teaching you how to use these applications, these apps. And I took it even further. My wife and I have shared our love of our music, but at the same time, I have to understand what she's listening to, because I'm not just designing it for people who are my age or our age. We're designing it for that next generation. And that's the thing that, you know, kind of when everybody was talking about, you remember those days when we were talking about how do you design for the millennial? That bothered me because the millennial is going to no longer want that cool hip thing. So we have to figure out a way to strike a balance through our design skills, that there are Instagram moments, there is technology, but there's also, we're designing across a broader spectrum. And the quotient of not hospitality, but the demand for quality design her generation is sort of pushing us, just as our generation learned that design was a really key element. I mean, I remember nobody talked about restaurant design when I went to college. I taught in the hotel school. I was a teaching assistant. We taught about how to make a decent hotel room, but not like today. I mean, it's amazing. It's such a great time to be doing this.
Well, I also like to be able to pull experience and vision from a 12-year-old and what they're using and how their experience is going to be. It promotes that idea of constant evolution. And
yes.
And Maya, speaking to you, where, you know, I heard you say that many of those design details just get lost on many people. I agree. However, when it's done right and done correctly, or it strikes that balance, if you will, I think there's this additive and cumulative effect to the overall experience. And, you know, in a lot of these conversations, it's all about, okay, the places that we leave or build or the people that we interact with, each one of those is an opportunity to change the trajectory of someone else's life experience. So
yeah,
I totally hear what you're saying on that front. And to be able to see it go from start to finish and then be there with your friends who might not appreciate it, I can see that conflict within you.
Yes.
One thing I didn't get is you said it was really important that it was cold, that we needed to know why it was cold. Bring me back around to that one.
It was just like setting the scene, you know, like I talked about how I was scared to go in there. I was very shy. I don't know how old I was, but I was very shy and just, I didn't want to speak up in these meetings. I didn't know if I was supposed to be there. You know, it's just this big, open, empty, cold space. And, you know, the question is like, what's going to go in there? How is it going to look in a few months from now, in a few weeks from now? Like, I always bring back this concept of a blank canvas. And that was literally what we were standing in. You know, we were standing in, it's like a polar bear in a snowstorm, right, Dad? And it just, you know, it's crazy to see how my dad's creative mind works. And it's something that I always have appreciated. And just standing there in that open, cold space, you know, gives you a different perspective.
And what was cool for
Mhm.
me, what was cool was when Maya started to think about combination of think about and kind of someone exerting a little pressure to think about the hospitality industry and to start thinking about going to the hotel school. Maya spent a couple of weeks at the restaurant after it had opened, and she worked in the pastry department for a while, which was crazy because she had never cooked or baked anything other than in like an easy bake oven, maybe.
Hey, be nice.
Holly hobby. But Maya, what I wanted to ask you about there is that, especially as you're starting your career journey, like graduating college now, you know, you're working on the more financial side of hotels, that nervousness that you felt about going in there, how did that inform you starting the job that you're at right now? And how did you make yourself feel comfortable and confident going into what you're doing now?
Well, I'm still working on that part, but it was a learning process. You know, I think I'll also tie it into the only child aspect, which if my friends ever listen to this, they will say that it's all I talk about ever. But I think it really does make me who I am in the sense that I was always surrounded by adults, you know? So even though that was walking into Gabrielle Kreuther, into this blank canvas was a big challenge for me, it's something that I've been able to put into my like personal toolbox, you know, and take it into my internships, take it into my jobs, and be able to gain that confidence and just be able to say, okay, like I can speak up for what I'm interested in and my opinion, but it's just about getting into the groove of things and being able to find your place, you know. So that's where I am now.
Okay, and then when you find that place or space where you get comfortable, like we all get uncomfortable, then we get comfortable. Like, how do you make yourself feel comfortable when you're feeling that nervousness? What do you do?
Well, I talk too much. That's what I do. But I bring it back to the hospitality aspect. So even though I am working in finance, it's still all related. And a lot of people, once again, don't see that, but I think that's kind of a gift of the hotel school. So I'm trying to connect with my coworkers. I'm not working with the clients as much, with the people that we're investing with, but I find a way to create that empathetic connection, you know, to make it seem like there's a person behind the numbers, there's a person behind the PowerPoints. And I think that's where you tie in everything that we're kind of discussing to my life personally.
So it's really listening, hearing what's going on, and making those kind of boring numbers be more human.
Yeah, making them human, making them personable, creating a story, you know, as simple as it sounds. Just at least that's how I like to do it. It makes it more exciting for me.
Okay, cool. And Glen, so not about you so much, but I heard you say like working for not for you, but for the company or for the team. Like what do you do to make your teams feel comfortable?
Well, what I do with my teams is I treat them, I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but I treat them the way that I want to be treated. And, and Maya alluded to this before, as we go through different jobs and we go through different places. And I wanted to be an architect from, I don't even know, from such a young age, probably because I grew up watching the Brady Bunch. And the dad was
Mr. Brady.
Was an architect for Maya, your generation. You don't know that. But
you tell this story all the time. So yes, I do know that.
But you only
Okay.
had one kid. You need 5 more, Glenn.
Yeah.
I know. Oof, that would be, yeah, I don't know what I would do. But anyway, I had jobs where I was part of a team, and I had jobs where, you're treated horribly. I remember a sign in one of the offices that I worked in. It said, it was like by the blueprint machine. Those are the days when we actually made blueprints. But it said, doing a good job around here is like peeing in a dark pair of pants. You have a warm feeling, but nobody notices. And then it went on to say, doing a bad job around here is like peeing in a white pair of pants. Everybody notices. So, it's a funny thing to say, but through the evolution of my firm, the success of the firm has been 100% on the people that have worked for me. And it's a small firm. We've had people who've gone on to do amazing things. And I applaud them. I'm a cheerleader. I don't expect that a lot of the designers that come through the office will stay with us for a long period of time. I want them to grow. I want them to participate. I want them to have a voice in the office. And that's the unique thing that I've been able to provide to designers, where we may not be paying the highest fee, the highest salaries to people, but the end goal, the benefit. I mean, we had a summer intern this summer who was amazing. And it was a weird time when we hired her to come on board. Fees are down, PPP, pandemic, all that stuff. And I said, listen, I can't pay you, but what I can give you is going to be much more valuable than what, if I paid you minimum wage. It would be BS, right? But the experience you're going to get, if you have the skills, we will put you on a team and you will be treated like an employee here, and you will go to meetings, you will design stuff, you'll figure stuff out, as much as you want to take on. I've had young designers who have run projects, and that is what I love about what I do on a daily basis. What I really dislike is, I know we're on Zoom right now, but the collaborative portion of what we do, we're pretty good at it on Zoom and, Teams and all these other platforms, but nothing replaces being in an office together and designing and pulling materials and say, hey, what do you think of this? But historically, over the 21 years, there have been incredible people who have come through the office who I hope that if they're asked the question, did you learn anything? Did you grow? That they would say unequivocally that they did that. And that's the true fundamental of what I've been able to do in terms of my practice, is we give people opportunities to tell incredible stories with some really great clients.
I think that's one of the things that makes our industry so amazing as far as hospitality, no matter what channel. There's this idea of nurture, growth, and mutually desired for success for everyone. So in all the people that I've met to, and many of the conversations that I've been having, when people grow and then they leave and start their own, I've never heard an ill word about it. It's always congratulations. I'm so happy for them. Where that's in our industry. I have friends in other industries where they're like, fuck that person. That's terrible. Like, I hope that they burn. It's like, it's a stark difference between us, because I feel like that there's that whole idea of nurturing and giving without expectation.
I want to tell a little bit of a story. So I went to the architecture school at Cornell, and this was I graduated in 1985, and this was pre computer drafting and laser cutting, laser etching, CNC routers, put in your 3D model and get it printed out as a 3D model on a 3D printer. We would spend night after night after night working on these perfectly drawn ink drawings on Mylar or on vellum. And we would hang them up bleary-eyed in the morning. And we'd have these perfect white models that we made. And, sometimes there'd be like, what am I going to do? I got blood on it, because it was like 5 a.m. and you're cutting your finger off. And you would never go and get it. We were tough there. We would just use Scotch tape or masking tape and tape it up and try not to get blood on your drawings or on your model. And you would pin it up the next day, and the professors would start to draw on it, and they would start to rip open your model. And it took me a long time to understand what they were doing. And when it finally connected with me was about a year after I started my firm. We had done a restaurant we had designed a hotel in Midtown, and we had designed the restaurant, and the restaurant had gotten a 2-star review from William Grimes in the New York Times. And this is before internet. He would read it everybody would wait till it was printed, but on WOR on Channel 9 in New York, he would have a sheet in front of his face, and he would read the review at midnight, and everybody would stay up and listen to this thing. And he wrote an amazing review of this restaurant. It was called Moda, M-O-D-A. And he mentioned my name in the review. It's like, holy shit, I've made it. And then a week later, Steve Cuso, who was the anonymous at the time, he's no longer anonymous, but he's still the food critic at the New York Post. He wrote, and I literally think that he did this because he wanted to piss me off. He wrote the headline in the New York Post review. It said, "No to Moda." And the letters were gigantic. It was like 60-point letters. And I realized at that moment why the professors were ripping apart our models and drawing on our models. We had to have thick skin, and we had to learn the hard way, because not everybody's going to be Bill Grimes and love your restaurant. They're going to take you down. And I pivot to the hotel school, where they're teaching about business, but using hospitality as the common thread, right? Hotel school. Well, I'm not going to run a hotel. Maya's not running a hotel or a restaurant, but hospitality, that's like the glue that connects it all. And I said to Dean Walsh one time, because I got involved with the advisory board, and I said, the amazing thing about the hotel school versus the architecture school, and the architecture school still does it, although you can reprint your drawing after a professor draws all over it. Hotel school, the architecture school was, we want you to succeed, but that success is going to be based upon fear and intimidation, because there are going to be critics out there. The hotel school, and I lighten my voice as I say this, they want you to succeed, but through the aspect of hospitality and empathy. And that's the big difference. And that's why I love the hotel school so much, and the graduates that come out. I will note that this incredible intern that we had this summer, she is going to get a second degree in interior design. Her first degree, she graduated from the hotel school, and was just an incredible product of the school, because she could communicate. I think about Maya, like Maya's growth from being a pretty shy only child to someone who
1 second,
gets up and speaks.
I want to go back to that architecture school experience where, and because it's an interesting dichotomy between the architecture school and the hospitality ideals, right? Empathy versus let's get you some thick skin so you can build it. I did a summer program at the architecture school when I was in high school, and Rand Hall, is that the name of the?
Yeah.
I remember being up all night building this cube with like fragmented spaces within it. And it was the first time I'd really learned about, I've done art and been very creative, but the design process, like having a thesis, picking a word, and then like fabricating it. And I was up all night, bloody fingers. We reviewed it, and it just got torn apart. literally, because it was like, oh, and I was mortified, shocked, horrible. But it also fed into my belief that feedback, negative, positive is great, but negative to me is also like an opportunity to reboot, an opportunity to really delight whatever is next, because it's so rare that we do get that negative feedback. Everything is like, oh, it's so nice and so great. But that negative feedback is just very directional for anything that I go through. So, going into like delivering hospitality and defining it, oftentimes the worst experiences help us find a different path onto the right road. So, Maya, coming back to you, whether it's a case study or a real life experience, or just, in your nascent career, what is the worst experience of receiving hospitality that you've ever had?
Well, same recent experience as my dad, which we can't disclose.
Oh, right. So a different one. Don't pick that one.
But, they hit two big hospitality people with bad hospitality. It just never ends well.
Okay. While you're thinking,
Yeah.
Glenn, how about you? As far as like one of those terrible experiences that really informed you in a different direction, that peeing in the white pants kind of situation.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm not going to relate it to an experience where I was on the receiving end of service, because we've all been in that situation. And I think that those are always the tests, right? How are you going to respond? How are you going to react? If there's a bug in your food, or there's something in your drink, or you get the wrong order, and I think that the neat thing about being in the community is again, having empathy for the people who might have made the mistake or didn't make the mistake and were delivering the mistake. I'll relate it to more about my clients. And the positives are, just before the pandemic, I had made a decision that I wasn't going to take on every single project. The gauge for me in taking on a project was I had to be excited about this project. I no longer needed, in my mind, to take on projects just to pay bills. I wanted to work with people that respected what we did, that had the passion for the project, that wanted to participate in the process.
And one other thing, just to bring it back to Maya there, that taking these passion projects that you're interested in because you don't have to pay the bills, having Maya finish college probably had a big role in that too, right?
100%.
Thank you, Maya.
You're welcome.
100%. When we knew she was off the payroll. But thank you for pointing that out. But I've had clients in the past that were really horrible human beings. And I remember one time where we had done a model room for a hotel, and it was a client that we had already done a project for, and I did not want to do this next project. Mm-hmm. And the client's father talked me into doing the project because he said, I really need you. I need someone with your expertise and experience to be able to help guide the process. And when the model room came, and we were treated so horribly by the offspring of the father, I called him up and I said, I can't continue to work on this project. And he said, I understand that, and I'll let you go. We'll mutually agree to do this. And his child fought me on that, and fought and said, no, we're gonna sue you. This is terrible. And I everything was set up to be, it doesn't matter about the design. It was just about the respect, and it was about the delivery. And at a certain point, you just don't want to take that kind of abuse. Or I've left projects when clients have insulted or have poorly treated my team. And that is not happening now because we're taking on projects. I'm doing a better job of evaluating clients when they're interviewing us. I'm doing a better job of interviewing them and finding out will this work out or will this
And
not work out?
so that's super interesting. Like, how do you figure out, like, what are your instincts or actual measurables that you are judging them on so that you decide whether it's a good fit or not?
Well, there's a very specific question I ask. And that question is, who's going to be making the decisions?
Okay. And
I won't go any deeper.
What's the best answer you could hear?
Well, the best answer is the most honest answer. And that is, I'm having my entire family look at this project. And Maya's laughing because she's heard some of these stories. But the reality is, if we're making a presentation to a client, and that client is going to go home and make the same presentation to the family and get their feedback, I make it very, very simple. Let me make that presentation to your family.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to have a voice, I want them to have a voice, but let them have a voice at the table where they're getting all the information. And the most successful projects are those that are completely honest and that those people are participating in the process. Because there's I do very thorough presentations. I love to give presentations. I love to tell stories about how we came up with this solution. And I don't think there's any way that someone who's hearing that for the first time or second time is going to be able to recreate that. And you have to understand the context of design to be able to really be able to tell the story. Why is there, and I remember this, we go back to Gabriel Crowther, we couldn't figure out, there were two things in this restaurant we couldn't figure out. We couldn't figure out a bar stool, and we couldn't figure out a chandelier in the middle of the dining room. And the day, and I remember I was with a chef and we were dining at a restaurant. It was with Drew at Batard, Drew Newport's restaurant. And I did a sketch of a bar stool. And he kind of comes over and he goes, "Oh, a bar stool that has the shape of a heart. That's perfect because that's how they welcome people in Alsace." And then we built the bar stool, didn't tell anybody about it. And the sommelier, the head sommelier, saw the bar stool coming into the restaurant, and she's like giving training, and she stops and she said, "I have to stop. I'm getting emotional about this bar stool. This bar stool is the way that Chef Crowther's basically saying, 'Welcome to my restaurant' with this bar stool."
I've never heard of anyone getting emotional about a bar stool. So thank you.
Oh my God,
sharing.
we get emotional about bar stools all the time. Bar stools are cool. But it had a heart carved in the back of the bar stool. And if you as you learn about Strasbourg and Alsace, and you understand that when the shutters are closed, the people in the home are resting. But when they open the shutters, oftentimes, definitely in Alsace, there's a heart that's either engraved or cut out or painted on the inside of the shutter that is now open facing out, which is the pineapple. That is the literal pineapple of Alsace. It is about hospitality. It's about welcome. And that simple move. Now, we talked about this earlier in the interview. There are so many little pieces of the story that have been woven through all of our projects, and very few people get that. And look, I wrote the book to be able to tell some of these stories, like the police uniform buttons that we put in Carbone. Nobody talks about the police uniform buttons, but it was our kind of nod to, gangsters and cops in Italian American restaurants. So
were they copper buttons?
They were brass buttons that we bought on eBay. They were vintage police coat buttons.
So you just said I love the story of the open shutters, and then there's the heart, and that's the pineapple being a symbol. But there's also this theme that I've been hearing of this open-hearted listening. And when I asked you about the types of clients that you like to work with or not, and who you want to, I want to present to your whole family.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I found that when I'm presenting, I'm really good at hearing what is unsaid. So when you're presenting, yeah, you're speaking, you're telling them the story, but how are you gauging and reading the room?
It's it's a great question, and I remember, like we didn't have we had flip phones when I first started, and nobody was really obsessed with their phones. And look, I've given presentations at HD and at BDNY and the different conferences, and you look out at the audience and you kind of pause, and nobody's listening. So, or very few people are listening. Sorry, everybody in the world. But the it's just through intuition. I mean, you do it as well. You're not only speaking, but you're listening, and you're seeing body language, and you're seeing how people smiling or people kind of frowning. And I get it when I interview people, and I'm brutally honest when I interview people, and I'll just stop them in the middle of when they're talking about for 10 minutes about a specific project. I said, you lost me, and if you're going to interview anywhere else, you have to. And I coach them, and I try and give them some feedback, like you you have to pay attention. If you sense that I'm gone and I'm not even looking at my phone, which I won't do in an interview, but pay attention to the room, pay attention to the people that you're presenting to. And then you get that feedback, you get that.
I love that. Now, so that paying attention and being open and like really you tapping into that intuition. Maya, are there any tactical things that you learned in the hotel school, whether working in operations or even just theoretical, to become a better listener?
I think a lot of it, honestly, hotel school, not so much. I can't name, I mean, probably, and I could simply not remember. So I guess it wasn't empowering enough is how I look at it. I think a lot of it comes back to like how I've grown up and just, learning from my dad and learning from my experiences with him. I'm a very visual learner. So I learn from experiences. I learn from sitting in on a meeting with him and just being like, okay, like that was a little weird, or why didn't they say something, or they said too much, or things like that. And I think that being a listener, and I also apply it in my personal life, so it's being there for your friends, being a good listener to them, not being the person that's always talking about yourself, but being the person that's open. And
so I'm really curious about this, because where your dad is saying he has intuition that's been honed and a muscle strengthened over decades doing what he's doing. Like you're just beginning your journey in hospitality. I mean, you've been in it for a while, but like now like more than 9 to 5, but every day you're doing it. And your intuition is forming right now.
Yes.
So has there been any advice or correction or feedback that you've gotten that maybe helped you think about it a little bit differently in your career?
I think it's definitely all about listening. Obviously, that's what it comes down to in terms of starting your career. But I think that asking questions is the most important thing. And whenever I ask at the end of an interview or just any conversation I have with anyone, a mentor, a friend, what advice do you have for me? Ask questions, be a sponge. Those are the two main things that I've heard time and time again. How can you learn as much as humanly possible in your career through each experience that you're a part of? So if that's by asking questions, if that's by listening and doing the research on your own, for me, it personally depends on the scenario. So, and I'm a very big reader in the sense of like reading the room, not as much reading what's on paper. Do people want to answer my questions right now? Is this a good opportunity to ask questions? So it's yes about listening, but I also think it's about inquiring too.
So from my experience, oh yeah, hold on. I just want to kind of fill in the gaps on here, because as I was really many years ago building a leadership team, I hired a leadership coach, and like we're all working there. We were coming up with these issues, like how do we solve them? And my team would start talking about them, and I would finish their sentences for them. And he told me in front of everyone, he's like, I saw him like getting antsy, and he's like, Dan, you have great people around you. You need to shut the fuck up and let them finish their sentences and listen. And it made going to those meetings every month, every quarter, every year. So difficult. But also I knew that growth comes from being uncomfortable. And it really changed me around. So that was one like good smack in the head that I got to just really listen more. And it's been a constant journey since then. And Glenn, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'll
Yeah,
listen to you.
no. And I love what you just said. And Maya doesn't like telling the story too much, but I'm going to tell
And I'm
the
sorry
story.
to curse in front of her.
Yeah.
Oh, she's like a truck driver.
No,
So.
I'm not. Be nice.
So I remember when Maya was going through the interview rounds at some of the places, and she called me up one day and she's like, I didn't get the job. And I'm like, why? And she said, well, it was going great. They asked me some questions. I had the answers to the questions. And there was one where I couldn't, Maya, correct me if I'm wrong. There was one question I couldn't answer the question. And so I said, well, what did you say? And she said, well, look, I could answer this question if you gave me more data and you allow me to ask you a couple of questions in order to get some context to the question. I said, you got the job. And she's like, why? I didn't answer the question. And I said, well, some of these questions are designed to find out if you're going to be a wise ass and you think you know the answers to everything. And what employers want to know is that you're not afraid to ask a question in order to answer a different question.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're in looking at a job that requires data and you don't have the data in front of you shows you do know how to work in a collaborative environment. And that to me was like, whoa, how did you even know to answer the question that way? And she did get the job. Look, I'm really, really proud of my kid. And it's moments like that where you feel like as a parent, you've done everything that you possibly can do. And her mom is amazing, is amazing in terms of counseling and coaching and raising and rearing. I remember the day when, someone asked Maya, hey, do you want to be an architect like your dad? And she said, no, he's never home.
Never said that. Did I say that?
I think you did say that.
But
if anybody's listening and is going to an interview, don't be afraid to say, you don't know the answer to the question, but I need more information. It can't just be like, no, I don't know the answer.
Yes.
You have to.
So I want to bring this into the present because, Maya, you went through that interview, you got the job, you're working in the capital markets, right? So if we're in the present right now, what's keeping you up at night?
A lot of things. My torn ACL for one of them, but
okay. Yeah.
In terms of greater life things, I've always been the kind of person who's ready for the next thing, So when I was in high school, I was ready for college. When I was in college, I was ready to work. And now I'm wondering, okay, where am I going to be 5 years from now? Am I still going to be doing this? Am I going to be pursuing a different career path? I get very antsy, so that's what keeps me up is not feeling, it's not a feeling as much of, I always want to know what's next. So I've been trying to kind of not accept that I can't control that, and to just try and go with the flow more often than not. But
thank you for sharing that. That's like really insightful for you to share. And you also gave some examples of when you felt that way before in the past. So if there were other people who were just starting out in their career, what advice can you give them about not getting that antsy feeling or staying with the antsy feeling, or like what advice can you give to others facing this issue?
I think in the past, I've kind of benefited from the antsy feeling. I think I've always been wiser than my age, I guess, not to compliment myself. But I feel like I've always, I don't know. I think that I've always just had a more holistic outlook on, I was always realistic with my friends, even growing up or in college. I lived in a house with 18 girls and I was the realistic one. I was the mom of the
Mhm.
house. Okay, Maya, what do we do here? And I think what I learned from that experience, especially, was to live more in the moment, but also be a sponge within those 18 bedrooms, that 18 bedroom mansion.
I forgot exactly how you put it, but it was like being okay with being in that nervous energy.
Yeah,
Is that what you said? It's
definitely.
really interesting you say that too, because as I'm doing this, an upcoming guest I have, she wrote a book called Nervous Energy, and it's about anxiety. She's a psychiatrist, or she's a psychologist,
Huh.
and it's about how do you stay in that nervous energy place and what can you learn from it. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And then
Maya,
Glenn,
do you think that any of that nervous energy comes from growing up dancing?
Probably. There's always an idea of like perfection with being a ballerina. And that was also me. I don't know. There's something in my DNA where I was always, I wanted to be the best, or I wanted to like move up and be with the big girls in my ballet class.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you have a torn ACL.
And now I have a torn ACL.
So ballet's got to wait for a little while.
Yes, that one's on the side burner.
Well, I like the ballet.
So does golf has to go on the side burner a little bit.
Now, Glenn, as far as like as you're thinking and seeing what's going on, and you've been through a lot of cycles, what's keeping you up at night these days?
Well, I will make a very strong point. Nothing is keeping me up these days because I'm on medication that makes me tired all day long. So for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic, I don't need anything to help me fall asleep at night. But hopefully not hopefully that part ends, but hopefully I don't have to take the medication for much longer. But you know, the pandemic has given me some perspective in terms of how we do our business, how we deliver our projects, and I feel like we can go after projects that are not locally based at this point because we're so good at being remote. I know earlier I said I don't like being remote, and that's true. I like the collaboration, but I think that the tools that we have show that we can design a project in Oklahoma, which is what we're doing, or we could go after work overseas. And so that's the positive part of it. The things that keep me up at night, if I do wake up at 5 a.m,
You always wake up at 5 a.m. What are you saying?
I know. Well,
Maya,
I'm like,
I didn't sleep well tonight. Maya,
remember what Springsteen said last night is like,
I'm in a bad
you know,
mood.
what Springsteen said is that he's up 5 times a night. So, you know, I'm not up that often, but that's related to him being 71. Can you believe Springsteen's 71 years old?
Yes, I can. And he has more energy than anyone I've ever met.
It makes
actually
no
haven't met
sense.
him. So, okay, going back to the keeping you up at night, like, and the pandemic, and
yeah,
what's keeping you up? Like, how are you
you know, look,
being okay with that?
I have an office that I'm paying rent for, that people are there one time a week. So I'm paying for an office space that it just seems silly, and it has seemed silly since the beginning of the pandemic. And I would go in and water the plants. Like, why do I need to be here? But I want to be there, and I signed a lease, and I'm sticking to it. But I believe we're going to be back in the office. But you know, paying that amount of money in rent every single month is asinine to me. But we're going to keep doing it.
So wait, going back to on that asinine thing, and something you said earlier that really struck me, this whole idea of Zoom, like, we're getting it done, we're collaborating, we're being creative, but I think so much is lost in that time waiting by the water cooler, in that time just after work, getting into the office, walking out, having lunch with people. That's where the ideas really get to germinate.
Well, I was in the office a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of people were talking, you know, and they were looking at things, and they were looking at each other's computer screens, and they were doodling a little bit, or they were pulling up some materials and showing them. And I just sat back, I leaned back, and I smiled, and I didn't say anything. It's just like, that's what I love about what we do. And you cannot do that on Zoom. You can't do that through a phone. I will say I've gotten more engaged on projects because I have to focus on a drawing or I have to focus on a submittal. And when I'm in the office, I feel like, hey, I hear what's going on. So it's okay that I don't see necessarily every single thing, but I do have a whole lot more. Look, everybody talks about I have more time on my hands than I've ever had before because I'm not commuting or I'm not sitting at my desk. And I do believe we've lost certain aspects of what makes us great. We've gotten better on some areas that we weren't so good at before, and that's following up on details. So the recalibration when I'm saying when we go back to the office, because it's not an if, we will be back in the office, whether it's 5 days a week, unlikely, but it could be 3 days a week. It could be a mixture. So I think about that. I think, look, I'm generally super optimistic. Our industry is so we're able to bounce back and we're resilient. The people in it, the projects in it we're working on incredibly exciting projects right now. We're redoing the Cheekwood Inn. It's a historic hotel on Shelter Island. We're doing a hotel, a new build in a small town in Hudson called the town is Coxsackie, or you might want to pronounce it Coxsackie, like the skin thing. But and a few restaurants, and we finished a food hall at Columbia University. It goes back to that desire to work on really great projects with really great human beings. And so what keeps me up is what kept me up in the past. What's next? What's our next tranche of projects in the pipeline?
So on the flip side of that, what are you most excited about in the future? What's most exciting you coming up?
Well, I think that what's exciting is getting back into the city on a regular basis and getting back with my team on a regular basis, and executing projects. Look, I don't know. There were so many different discussions, and I was on different advisory boards about how we're going to come out of the pandemic, how we're going to treat it, how we're going to do this, how we're going to do that. Lessons learned. Yes, there are certain lessons that are immediate in terms of how we deliver projects better. Will the dining population change? Will I did another interview a couple of days ago where someone said, are we in this cycle of why are restaurants being a certain way? And I said, well, it's kind of cyclical. If you look at it, after 9/11, restaurants became very casual because people wanted a hug. People needed a hug. We needed to hug people. What is the characteristic that's going to come out of the pandemic? Is it similar to what we were seeing after 9/11, or is it something that we saw similarly as we came out of the financial crisis in 2009?
I don't know, but I just want to hug everyone I see. That's kind of where I
agree.
am.
I agree. And I'm sorry I missed HD Summit this year. I know you were there. And I've spoken to some people that said it was like the old days, right? When it was smaller and more intimate. And I remember meeting you for the first time and playing poker, it may be in Beaver Creek, and going, oh man, it was like 2 years after I started my firm. And I'm like, shit, this is awesome. Like, I'm hanging out with these dudes and we're skiing during the day. What could be bad about this?
I think that was one of the first ones.
It was number 2.
It was number 2. Okay, there we go. 20 years ago, 19 years ago, something like that. So
what look, I'm on Stacy's advisory board for the HD magazine, and I miss the community. Like Maya said earlier, hospitality is about community, but we know our community, and you and I both feel, I know because we've talked about this, we feel the same way about this incredible community. And I'm not competing with anybody. There's so many projects. I'm a cheerleader for people that do what I do, and I respect what everybody does. And that's the sense of this community. We're not cutthroat. We're, again, that difference between Cornell Architecture School and the hotel school. is that we want to see people succeed through hospitality, not through fear and intimidation.
Yeah.
So
I couldn't agree more. And I miss that community as well. And just thinking about, winning and community and transitioning to, are the Jets going to be over 500 this year?
they're winning it. They're going to win it all.
You are the eternal optimist, Glenn. That is the best thing I've heard in a really long time.
Listen, there's no, we're in first place right now.
Okay. It's preseason.
Yeah.
Enjoy
don't
it.
get me started on sports because, I spent 3 years at Nike, and one of the greatest lessons that I learned when I was at Nike is the sports metaphor. And I've used this throughout my career. And this, you didn't set me up on this on purpose, but I'm going to take it and run with it. But every project we do is like a new season. It's 0-0. And we can't, just because we won the World Series last year doesn't mean we're going to win it again this year. So every single project is an opportunity to win, to learn about ourselves, to tell stories. But at the end of the day, we're only as good as what we're doing and what is in front of us, not just what we did previously.
Well, enjoy that optimism for the Jets because they are in first place. And I really want you to stay with that. But thank you for sharing that Nike story. I do like that. I look at like every calendar year is a new opportunity. It's, you're starting at 0. I look at every quarter to do new initiatives it's a fresh slate. I heard someone say, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago or today, right? It's a fresh start. So
Springsteen said last night that the future has not been written yet.
It hasn't.
Yes. I know it's not a Springsteen quote, but maybe it was a Martin Luther King Jr. quote. I'm not sure who to attribute it to other than the boss, right?
Well, we can attribute a lot to the boss. He's incredible. And also being a fellow Jersey boy, we got them all together.
That's true.
Hey, Glenn, where can people find you?
Well, currently I'm downstairs in the den of my home in Westchester. But Instagram, it's Glen Coben, at Glen Coben. And the company one is at Glen and What is it, Maya? You're the director of digital media.
Like, you made it so poorly. It was like at Glen _and_co_ company.
I don't know.
Well, what about the company website?
glenandcompany.com, all spelled out, GLEN, not like my grandmother who gave me 2 N's my entire life. God bless her. She made it to 101 and still spelled my name wrong for however many years I was alive, she was alive. But yeah, glenandcompany.com.
How do people buy Max?
The book.
How do people buy Max and the Magic Mushroom and the Architect's Cookbook?
Well, we'll start with the Architect's Cookbook. It can be purchased on Amazon. But if someone is looking to interview me to do a restaurant, I usually bring that as a business card.
You shouldn't tell people that.
Well, no, but I also say that I'm not going to sign it unless we work together.
So valuable.
It's more valuable unsigned because you can return it to Amazon.
It's like a Mark Sanchez it's like a Mark Sanchez autograph or a Boomer Esiason autograph.
Oh, Boomer. And then Max and the Mighty Mushroom has had a limited edition printing, and you have to be a very good friend who has a baby, and that becomes a baby gift.
Wonderful. Hey, Maya and Glenn, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I also want to say thank you to everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Dan.